This is the 2022 Volvo XC40 Recharge. It's the first full electric SUV from the Swedes. And this thing is meant to be more of the stepping stone into the full EV onslaught Volvo is planning by 2030. And if this is anything to go by, it is a very exciting time that's coming up. And that's because this attempt at an EV is possibly one of the best I've seen as a first execution from a brand that is using a petrol-powered chassis and then puts some batteries in it, some electric motors, and creates themselves an EV. Now in this review, I'll walk you around all the outside features, the interior features, take it for a drive, and let you know what it's like to charge this EV, and of course answer the all-important question of should you buy one of these. So with all that said, my name's Cameron, this is Product Review Cars, let's get into it. Now, if you want to see new EV reviews just like this one on this channel, go ahead and hit subscribe and hit that notification bell. It helps show your support for this channel. And also, if you've already subscribed, thank you very much. And we love your support and viewership here. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. Now, the exterior of the XC40 is one of the biggest selling points for a lot of new EV drivers. And it's because it's understated compared to the likes of Hyundai with their new Ioniq and Tesla with their Model 3, Model S, and Model X. Those things are looking very spaceship-like and also very, obviously an EV because they just look a little bit different from everything on the road, where this, you could almost mistake it for the petrol-powered XC40. The biggest giveaway would be this filled-in grille up front, which does draw a bit of attention because it looks a bit odd when you'd expect a grille to be there, but I like how that looks as a subtle nod that this is an EV. Now with the exterior design, I'm loving this flat sort of mixed metallic paint. It looks really quite nice on this car. Black contrasting looks great. They have these things called R design, roof rails up top, which do look quite good, and it means obviously you can load this thing up with a roof pod to make it even more practical. You've also got these things called Thor hammers LED lights. These are daytime running lights that are meant to emulate, the Swedish famed Thor. And here's Hammer on the front, which do look very good and they're nice and bright, especially these LED headlamps at night, which are adaptive. They turn with your wheel, and they also are really quick to adapt to avoid dazzling oncoming drivers. So other drivers will thank you for having these bright LEDs that stay out of their eyes. Now ground clearance is actually pretty decent. It's still very much a small SUV, so it's lifted off the ground. And along the side, we have 20-inch, what they call diamond cut alloy wheels, which look fantastic on this car. And I just really like the side profile of this thing. It's very boxy, and they really lent into the whole SUV thing when they went to go build the XC40. Love the flat bonnet, love how aggressive the windshield comes up, I love how flat the roof is, and how all the lines just look so ideal for a boxy, miniaturized sort of XC90. It looks really quite good along the side. Now it's looking very standard back here. The only thing that gives it away as being the XC40 Recharge is the fact that it says Recharge along the side. Am I a fan of the name? Well, not really. I think Recharge is pretty standard, but it is spelled along the back. Now, we also have the Recharge Twin, which refers to the dual motor setup that this has for its all-wheel drive system. We have Volvo stamped across the back, and we do have some hard plastic, but what I found very interesting is actually gloss plastic trim way down underneath, which, yeah, it's a bit of a weird thing because these things scratch and show scuffs quite easily. And the fact that it's very low on the car is an interesting design choice, especially when you've already got this tougher plastic up top. So to me, one of the biggest surprises actually was the boot space back here. We have a nice automatic tailgate, opens nice and wide, nice hard boot cover as well. But you actually get a decent amount of storage in here. What concerns me with EVs that share platforms with, say, petrol or diesel motors with the same chassis is that they usually get a compromised boot space and second row space. But already spoiling what's ahead, both of those things aren't impacted by a lot. So what you have here is a nice flat load floor all the way through, and then under here, which you have this clever folding little boot, you've also got even more boot space under here. It's not very uniform, but it is plenty of storage space for like extra shoes, towels, whatever you want. Now what I do like is that there's these little bag hooks that pop up when you fold it back. So it is nice to see that you have a pretty decent sized boot space for a small SUV, even though this is fully electric and has 2 motors in it. Oh, and this Volvo has a little sensor underneath the boot back here, which I've found to be a little hard to find sometimes. You sort of see where it is on the back here. It says, oh yep, just move your foot back and forwards, and There you go, we got it. So you can close it using your foot, but I found it to be a little hard to find where that spot is. Maybe that's something you learn over time pretty quickly. Now there are 2 boots in this car, which is actually great because if you're looking to shop with brands like Mercedes, they don't really include many front trunks. Even the new EQS model doesn't have a front trunk. So when I was reviewing this XC40, I was very surprised to see that there is a front trunk. You have to go and follow the little arrow here to get the latch open, and you open it like you would if you were opening a car bonnet normally from the inside. And what you get is a seriously impressive trim on the front. There is no exposed batteries, there's nothing here. Sure, it's an absolute nightmare to anyone who loves working on their own cars, but to me, and people who are mainly going to drive EVs, this looks very appealing and clean. But let's reveal what's in this front. It's actually a bit smaller than what you might see in a Tesla, but it is nicely trimmed with a bit of felt on the bottom, and it's even got a bit of waterproofing in it as well, so it means that you can put items in here and they'll be safe. I actually like putting stuff like shopping up here as well, because it just means that it is less likely for it to be thrown around the front than it is at the back, just because it's a bit smaller and a bit more snug. So this is a really cool bit of storage, and I really like how well it's finished up here. Now this is what an electric Volvo looks on the inside. It is pretty standard of what you would expect from Volvo in 2022. And by pretty standard, I mean really impressive. The materials in here are nice and soft. There's great execution and build quality that's been made on the inside as there has been on the outside. It really matches that sort of sweet, nice, minimalist, also like, you know, not high quality type vibe that this car is going for. I really like this interior by sight and by touch. Up top, we see a giant Harman Kardon speaker up here. This is fitted out with a upgraded system, which is made by Harman Kardon. We also have some aluminium trim running along here, which looks great. And then what I think is quite interesting is this sort of this woolly carpet material on the inside of the door, which feels very nice to touch, but I can't help but feel like touching my leg hair a little bit, so it's a little bit woolly on the side, but it looks great. You have a 9-inch vertical touchscreen here, which is really cool because it's actually a Google infotainment system that's been implemented into Volvo's cars, going to Volvo and Polestar's cars. And I can say I've been very impressed with the performance of this thing. It looks great, it's got a great response time, of course, great contrast, and it also is very bright. I love the vertical integration too. It looks very natural, doesn't look stuck on or anything like that. And I like how it doesn't really dominate the dashboard. And there is a actual physical home button, just like an Android tablet. So that's really useful whenever you're deep into the menus or somewhere else and you want to get back home. And you've also got 2 layouts as well. You've got like a grid view and an app view. So that's really handy in case you're trying to find something quickly. You can jump between the 2 of those views. And then you've also got Google Maps integration, which shows you where all the charging ports are. And to be honest, I think I would trust a third party like Google to show me where the chargers would be, rather than one of those inbuilt ones into a car brand that doesn't really integrate a third-party system, and they've gone and manually entered in all the nearest charging ports. So that's something just to note with the Google integration. Now there are some buttons that stay the same down the bottom, so that's really nice, they don't go away. So you've got quick access to your heated seats and heated steering wheel, same for the passenger side as well, and quick adjustment for the fan and climate controls. This is all in the touchscreen, so this may or may not be a little annoying for people who are a bit touchscreen, phobic, and they don't really want to be using a touchscreen, because that's where everything is in this car particularly. There are no hard buttons for the climate controls apart from defrosters, so just be wary of that if that's something that really irks you. But I can tell you the response time and how easy the screen is to navigate, it really is not a problem, for me at least. Now, finally, this car has Google Assistant integration. So that means I should be able to turn on my heated seat by asking Google. So let's try that. Hey Google, turn on my heated seat.
All right, turning on the seat heater for the driver.
There you go. How cool is that? Like, I mean, it is just, it works most of the time. I've had some issues with it when you sort of ask it something that it probably doesn't know the answer to. And you can also sync this up to your Google account, so you can do anything with the Google Assistant through the car, and it will contact your things that are connected to your Google account at home. So that's really quite cool. Now, driver's display is great. It's nice and crisp, great dark levels as well. It's on a sort of a bit of a dark mode. Google Maps pops up there. It looks fantastic, very easy to read out what's happening. And then additionally, the steering wheel feels great in the hand, although I would love the media control controls will be on the left and the cruise control features to be on the right. It's just something my brain sort of thinks that the media controls will be closer to the screen. Now the pedal setup is great. I feel like I've got a good driving position. These seats are nice and comfortable. They hug me in relatively well. And you've also got an extension for your lower legs. So it means you don't get those tired legs over long journeys. You can sort of extend this out to get a bit more of an extended sort of bottom to your seat. Now the shifter here is quite interesting. You know, it's a very small shifter. It looks great in the hand, but it actually doesn't require you to turn on the car. You just hop into this car, go into drive, and the car starts going, which is fantastic. Put it into park, open the door, everything starts running until you close the door and lock the car. So that's what I love about this car, is that it feels very, you know, forward thinking and well thought out when you don't even need a start button to get in, although you can see where the start button might exist in the dashboard. Now there is a wireless charger below this. There's 2 USB ports. There is a 12 volt at the front too, and a tiny little storage bin, which I'm assuming is just for the key because it's so small and you can't remove it. But what you can remove is this little bin. So if you've got any parking tickets or, you know, any sort of rubbish, you can chuck it into this bin here, and then once you're done with it, this whole thing comes out. So then you can go ahead and dump that into the bin. So that is a great inclusion for a family car like this one, and I wish more cars just had something like that. So the opening into the second row seats is a little bit tight for some bigger people, and that's because of this giant bulge here, but it's nicely trimmed with a bit more of a tougher plastic, so it doesn't really matter if you accidentally rub against that. Now, hopping into the back here, this is what really impressed me for a EV that also shares a platform with petrol-powered alternatives in this range, and that would be the footwells are actually usable. So I can sit here, I've got plenty of feet room, my knee room is very good, especially sitting behind me. I'm 5'11", that's my normal driving position, and then look, I can sit here quite comfortably. Now I do feel like I'm sitting a bit more upright, and I definitely feel like I'm sitting in an SUV. I do like the large glass roof here. It can open at the front, so it gives you a bit more airflow into the cabin, but it does look good to look out of. Now I do like how the door's trimmed here. You've got that woolly material in the door, you do have an aluminium handle at the back, and it just is a nice square window. But what is a little bit interesting is that this little rear trim piece of the car, where the design sort of goes up like this, does impede on a bit of light towards the back. So it becomes a bit of a triangle shaped window rather than another square. So that is something just to note, that it is a little bit of a weird little design feature, but it's not all that bad. Now the controls in the middle here, we have some climate vents, 2 of them, which is very good, so I can have air going while the other passenger may not want that. And I've also got 2 USB-C ports, and we've also got 3 zone climate controls for the outer passengers. Now this armrest in the middle, very comfortable. I do like these soft little tabs here to hold any drinks in place. That is quite funny looking, and they also are, you know, a bit well thought out. So that's kind of cool. Now this middle seat here is gonna be a bit of an interesting proposition for some. Now you definitely cannot put your feet in between here unless you have the smallest feet I've seen, because this thing is just too small to put any shoes on up here, and I wouldn't imagine this would be too comfortable for any adults. So sitting here, you're gonna be putting your feet either side of this little center console. You're gonna play footsies with the outside passengers. But you can sit here relatively comfortably, but you can see my shoulder room is impeding on these people on the outside, so it's gonna be very snug carrying 5. So for 4, I would definitely recommend. So getting into the Volvo XC40 is kind of surreal, because you go ahead and the car's already on. I didn't press anything to get started. So it's pretty weird in that sense. Everything just comes alive, your phone gets connected. It's all very seamless. You put your phone in the wireless charging pad and you're ready to go. So nothing to start, stop. You just get in, press drive, and get going. Now, there is a bit of a hard task when it comes to pulling off the line, because this thing doesn't really crawl forwards all that much. You sort of have to press the pedal to get going. Once you get going, it is very seamless. Now, on tap from the dual motor setup and 78 kilowatt hour battery, we have 300 kilowatts combined and 660 newton meters of torque. Why does it get me all revved up? Well, because that is an insane power output for something that costs below $80,000, and it's an EV that's a family car. There's no Polestar branding on this thing. This isn't like the performance version of this car. There's no sports mode. This car is a pure single model and it puts out a ridiculous amount of power. This is the definition of a sleeper. No one's going to suspect that a car like this has that power. They'll assume it's quick if they know it's an EV, but this sort of power is utter insanity if you ask me for a car like this. I sort of went into the Volvo XC40 Recharge a bit blind. Look, I was expecting 0 to 100 times of maybe like 8 seconds, 7 seconds if we're lucky. 0 to 100 times? 4.9 seconds claimed. What the heck? That is insane. A 4.9 second 0 to 100 time in a small family car is just ludicrous. And this isn't a special model you have to buy. There's no performance pack. There's nothing here that would suggest that this car is capable of doing that. So I thought the Hyundai Ioniq 5 I had the same week as having this would have been the performance car out of both of them. You know, that's the thing that looks a bit more sporty. It's all-wheel drive as well, but you would think that's a bit faster. That's actually couple seconds slower than this thing. So when I started driving this and showing people around, you know, going, oh, here's this new Volvo I've got, I was a little bit taken back and I had to go and reread the spec sheet and realize how much power this thing packs. So is this thing underpowered at all? Absolutely not. And you know what? That's going to be one of the biggest selling points of this car, on top of everything that makes this thing so great, and the fact that it is a good example of what Volvo makes. It is just a stupid amount of power for daily driving, but I wouldn't say stupid for going on road trips, because it makes you feel just a bit more safe when you can just get out of danger's way like that. And then driving around town, effortless torque is always enjoyable. Now, as we get going from a standstill like this, we can just, oh, it is like a roller coaster with this power delivery. The one pedal driving is actually the other thing that really impressed me, because that's something that a lot of brands can get wrong, and they have in the past. Volvo is not one of them. They have really nailed this one pedal driving experience, so much so that I rarely ever touch the brake pedal, if at all. It is really quite good, and it should have people who own Teslas, you know, a bit more aware of brands catching up to what Tesla is doing. This is finally the year where I think we're going to see a bunch of brands bring out cars that are very much on par with what Tesla's been delivering over the past couple of years. Now, you can sort of hear the electric motors and that sort of sound generator whirring away in the background as you sort of slow down. It's usually as you come off the accelerator. So that's something that's a little bit funny, and that is some noise that is being generated from this car that is not a exact petrol motor, but you do get a little bit of sound. And the 20-inch wheels actually ride pretty well. There is a bit of an element that this car is a bit stiff and a bit heavy at times, and it's not off-putting, but it just makes this car feel a bit more solid, but it's not a disturbing ride at all. The 20-inch wheels look great and they ride fairly decently as well. Now, taking off again, this mid-range torque, 660 Newton meters on tap. It's just, I did not expect something like an XC40 to perform like this. Like, we go up this hill and away we go. Oh my gosh. The Pirelli P0 tires on this do a great job of gripping, although there has been a hint of a little bit of front wheel drive bias occasionally when I was going through the wet. They were sort of slipping just a little. I wasn't really pushing it all that hard in the wet, but it was something I noticed just briefly. But I can't imagine a car handling 660 Newton meters of torque very beautifully all the time. That was sort of expected. And it was never like an understeer thing as well. It just performed just as you would hope it would, and the all-wheel drive system has been very good in this car. Now, in terms of the steering feel, it is a little on the numb side. That's the one thing that just sort of reminds you that this is a Volvo XC40, is that it certainly steers like one. But with all the batteries below us, we've got a nice direct driving experience, but because we're a bit higher off the ground, it sort of does translate into a little bit of body roll and pitch. But that is because this car is meant to be a bit more softly sprung than something that is a bit closer to the ground. Now, Volvo claims just over 400 kilometers of range in here. Real world's probably just below that. And I found the battery has been draining, you know, as I would expect it to be. I've sort of used 30% over my week, noting that I had 2 cars during the week, so it was as I would have sort of hoped for this car. And look, the efficiency is not the worst. It's actually okay. I've sort of averaged 26.2 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, but mind you, I've been showing you on camera what it's like to sort of accelerate this thing a bit harder. So I could imagine just daily driving this thing, you should see that figure go down a little bit more. Now the radar cruise control and system in here is really quite good. It's just sort of an example of Volvo's safety features that they all have in here. So I never really feel like the car isn't looking out for me. I love the sensors in here. They're very clear to understand. They're sort of a little bit, they sort of project from the rear corners depending on what's closer to you, which is kind of cool. So as the closer you get, the left side gets a bit louder, and the right side vice versa. Rear cross traffic alert's great. Top-down 360 camera is decent, but I did find that it does warp the perception of things just a little bit closer, more than maybe some other cameras might. So I usually defaulted the reversing camera whenever I was going for a park, but it was good to use that top-down camera when you need to line things up. And really, with no creaks and rattles present at all in this car when I've been driving it. So when it's time to charge the Volvo XC40 Recharge, there are a couple of ways you can do it. You can do it from a fast charger up to 150 kilowatts, and that will, on the Volvo website, will tell you that you'll get from 0 to 80% in 40 minutes. That is a little bit on the slow side for my liking, and hopefully you can find something a little bit faster. But on a 150 kilowatt charger, that's what you can expect from Volvo's claims. Now, when you have a 50 kilowatt charge like this, things might be just a little bit slower, but it's certainly gonna be faster than charging at home. If you have a 3-phase charger to get from 0 to 100%, that's gonna take you around 8 hours. And if you're just gonna plug it into a normal household plug, Volvo reckons it could take up to 72 hours to get a full 0 to 100% charge. So I would definitely recommend getting a home charger installed if you want to charge at home for most of the time, if you don't want to use one of these. But if you want to use one of these, this is my local charger here, and I'm going to show you what it's like to charge here, and I want to see how much range I get in 5 minutes of using a 50 kilowatt charger. And we have around 250 kilometers of range quoted right now. So 5 minutes, let's see what we get. So it's been 5 minutes, and how did we go? So we went from 69% to 73% in 5 minutes, and we also added around 10 kilometers of range in that time. So we went from around 250 to 260 on average, and depending on how I drive home, that should be pretty realistic. So look, using a charger like this, even a 50 kilowatt hour one, that is a pretty quick charge, and I think that is actually fairly decent and respectable for an EV in 2022, and it makes it very livable. I just think the advertised 0 to 80% 40 minutes is not really something that's going to sell a whole bunch of people. People probably expect now to be down closer to 30 to 20 minutes for that sort of charge. So at least in real world, it feels a lot quicker than it says on the website. Now, who needs a performance European SUV with a thirsty petrol or diesel motor when you have this? This is on the smaller side, yes, but it is an excellent proof of concept to show just how far the Swedes will go to make sure you have a comfortable, luxurious, and very capable on-road with its performance, all packaged into a small EV like this one. Now, I'm very excited to see what the bigger and more exciting cars from Volvo might do, like a bigger, more powerful XC90, or even some of the sedans and station wagons. We got to stay tuned for that, but the XC40 is an excellent place to start because this is where the market's appetite is at. And for the price, I think the performance bargain is there. And also for the build quality, storage space, finishings, all that sort of stuff, I think you've got yourself a very good deal as well for a EV in 2022 like this one. Now, for me, the charging is a tad on the slow side, but when you're buying an EV, you are sort of understanding that it is not going to be the same as buying a petrol or diesel car. So the charging times in that regard aren't actually so bad. Now, a wish list for future generations would be even faster charging just using a 150 kilowatt charger, but at the time, I would most likely recommend that you install a 3-phase charger into your home if you are buying one of these. And if you can't do that, then I would definitely recommend getting acquainted with your local charging network, because charging just via a household plug won't really cut it. But for a small SUV that is full EV, this thing is absolutely one of those cars that should go towards the top of your list. And for the price, I think it is very bang on for being one of the best options at the moment, especially with the absence of the Tesla Model Y in our market. this thing is reigning supreme at the moment. So thank you so much for watching. Remember to show your support by hitting subscribe to this channel to see more EV reviews just like this one. Go follow us on Instagram at Product Review Cars, and I'll see you in the next one.